Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. It's the post-game pod from the Timberwolves Game 3 loss in the conference finals, the Dallas Mavericks. We'll talk about Luka and Kyrie, how much of this is the Mavs being incredible and the Timberwolves not playing well. We'll break the whole thing down here on the show today. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Monday, everybody. It's Memorial Day in the U.S. And it's not such a happy Monday from a Wolves perspective. Timberwolves are down 3-0 in the Western Conference Finals to the Mavs. This is the post-game pod talking about Game 3, and a lot went wrong here. The Mavericks have been incredible so far. The Wolves have not played well. I want to give like a quick, piece on, say my piece, I guess, on the Wolves' start to the series and what's been so frustrating about it more broadly. But we'll get into the weeds a little bit on this game, obviously, as well. We'll talk about Kyrie and Luka, the Wolves, how they've chosen to defend them, and especially here in Game 3. And we'll talk about issues on offense. And the Wolves' stars really being MIA in this series to date. So lots to get to. A big thank you here off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, the show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. All right. So, didn't have a show after Friday's game. Of course, there was the postcast, but that was Friday night, so did not have a dedicated postgame pod here on the Locked On Wolves feed. So, taking this series in its totality, what's most frustrating to me on a macro level is the Timberwolves have not played well. I don't think there's any question about that. They haven't played horrendously. They haven't, there were a couple stinkers, if not 3 stinkers in the Denver series where they were played much worse. We've certainly seen the Wolves play worse, but they're just not, it's a lot of the little things. And then things that have gone right all season are suddenly going wrong at the worst possible time. Combined with the Mavericks collectively, they're not playing great outside of Luka and Kyrie, both playing incredible. And that's kind of what the playoffs comes down to, right? Assuming the Mavericks close out this series, whether it's in 4 games or 5 games or maybe 6 games. We're going to look at this in the easiest thing is, well, who is the best player in the series? And of course, that wasn't, last round the Wolves beat the Nuggets. So that's immediately disprovable. It's not always the best player's team that wins, but in the NBA, oftentimes it is. And that's the Mavs have the best player in the series. And we could argue about who the second and third best players are. I would argue that coming into the series, I would have certainly had an argument about Luka being the best player in the series and Ant and Cat being the second and third best players in the series. And you could argue Rudy Gobert in that conversation. Obviously, Kyrie has been far better than any of those 3 guys on the Wolves side in this series. But I mean, you could have had that argument, and that was one of the surface level arguments for the Wolves winning this series was the Mavs may have the best player, but the Wolves have the next 3 of the next 4 best players in the series, if not 4 of the next 5 next best players. I mean, who wouldn't go to Jaden McDaniels or Naz Reid? I mean, I think most people would say they're better than the Mavs' 3rd and 4th best players. Now, the Wolves lost the first 2 games by a combined 4 points. This game, they led with 5 minutes to play, and obviously it was closer than the 9-point final. They've been in every single game in the series. Every single game has been close, and it's been Luka and Kyrie closing the game, and the Wolves' offense being completely rudderless at the end of the game. This game specifically, I thought the Wolves did a decent job defensively in terms of their game plan. Game 1, it was a ton of dropping. Game 2, they mixed in some other stuff. They also tried to not allow Ant to be as worn out as he was. They tried to do some things differently, and of course, they built that big lead in Game 2 that vanished rather quickly in the third quarter. And then things kind of went out the window down the stretch, and it was just Luka being Luka. And Kyrie, of course, is very quiet down the stretch in game 2. Game 3, I thought the Wolves actually, strategy-wise, it was their best game defensively. Let me be clear. Defensively. I thought that putting Ant on Derrick Jones Jr. made some sense. Now, Conley got shredded by Kyrie, and he also got into some foul trouble, which then in turn hurt the Wolves' offense. Although Conley, other than making some catch and shoot threes, I don't know was all that impactful offensively either. But the bigger issue was his defense on Kyrie. He just can't. It's not 2014 Mike Conley right now. He can't guard Kyrie Irving. And the Wolves didn't see any positive value, or I should say, positive change in value from Anthony Edwards offensively until the third quarter. And then he only scored, I think, 4 points in the fourth anyway. And one of those buckets was a meaningless one in, the last possession of the game. So I think in game 4, and we'll talk more about this on Tuesday's show, you have to go back to Ant guarding either Luka or Kyrie. I mean, your back's against the wall. It's just got to happen. Like, nobody's ever won 4 in a row. We'll talk about that too in a playoff series. Or I should say 4 in a row, win down 0-3. But you're not going to do it if Ant's not more involved defensively. He's one of your best 3 defenders. He's got to be involved. And there should be enough talent offensively. And Ant obviously still did some stuff offensively in this game that was positive. You can't give that assignment to Mike Conley. Other than that, I thought doing some different things in pick and roll, they did some more blitzing. I think I would be willing to bet that the percentage of pick and rolls that were blitzed from Minnesota, either blitzed or trapped on the perimeter, increased from game 1 to game 2 and from game 2 to game 3. I think they did more of it in this game. And by and large, the Mavs made the right reads. And obviously, Derek Lively going out with the head injury, or officially the neck injury in the first half, mattered quite a bit. He's not as impactful in the short roll as a playmaker, or I'm sorry, he is far more impactful in the short roll as a playmaker than, say, Dwight Powell. There's no question about that. And more than Daniel Gafford. So that was a big thing. He only played 9 minutes in this game because of the injury. And the Wolves were able to get a bit of a foothold defensively there. But Luka was just so dynamic. And the second piece of this was, as the game wore on, and especially in the third quarter, the Wolves were just not allowed to play as physically as they were in the first 2 series of the playoffs. And I want to be clear about this. Like, you have to adjust the way the game's being called. That is, you'd say that in any sport. But if you make those adjustments and then the game is still not called in a consistent way, then it becomes very frustrating. So I'm not saying the Wolves lost because of officiating. I want to be very clear about that. But the way that Jaden McDaniels was trying to guard Luka Doncic is not any different than how he would have guarded Jamal Murray last series. It's not any different than how he guarded Devin Booker in the first round, or Bradley Beal, or how Cat guarded Kevin Durant. And I know that different officiating crews have different interpretations of the rules, different applications of how they're going to, call these fouls. But this was rough. And that only compounded the problems the Wolves were already having defensively. And if you're going to saddle Jaden McDaniels with 5 personals late in the third, early in the fourth quarter, whenever it was, he gets limited to 32 minutes in this game when he was also very good offensively. That matters. And Luka is adept at drawing fouls. It just, it is what it is. By the letter of the law, a lot of that stuff, they were fouls. What's confusing is why they weren't fouls until this game. That's the part that's so frustrating. And of course, we know Luka is more than happy to, I don't want to say occasionally embellish, but certainly make it obvious that there's contact, whereas Anthony Edwards is more likely to finish through the contact. And this is a strategy shift, I guess, that maybe Ant needs to make. I don't know. It's not as fun to watch. Luka's an incredible player, but would anybody outside of Mavs fans say that he's more fun to watch than Anthony Edwards? I know that's not the argument here. I know Luka's up 3-0. This isn't sour grapes. This is the way that the NBA game is being officiated objectively. It just is. And the Wolves put themselves in a position for that to matter. It's not why the Wolves lost. Again, I want to be very clear. I'm reiterating this point. But it puts you behind the 8 ball when when your identity as a team is shifted because of the lack of impact you're able to have from a physicality standpoint. Now, They still lost by 9. They were still in this game down the stretch. Plenty of other things we can point to. Missed free throws. Karl-Anthony Towns. Wow, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Anthony Edwards offensively. But I thought overall the defensive strategy was improved for Minnesota. Luka and Kyrie were amazing. And this series, and I'll get a bit more into this as well, and certainly on Tuesday's show, was so far, I shouldn't say was, is to this point more about Kyrie and Luka being incredible than it is an indictment on anybody on the Timberwolves team. I don't think there's any question about that. And certainly there's blame to be had for the Wolves. This isn't a game where it's like, well, the Wolves played their best and the Mavs were just better. No, the Mavs played really well. The Wolves didn't. It was still a close game. But Luka and Kyrie were so incredible that no matter what the Wolves did defensively, they were still able to score. I mean, like, seriously, like, again, we'll get into this. I mean, the Mavs, again, turned the ball over more times than Minnesota. The Mavs did not have an edge on the glass. In fact, the Wolves were a +1 on the glass. There's a lot of areas in which the Wolves did just fine. But they missed open threes. The Mavs got to the line a bunch. And Luka and Kyrie are closers. The Wolves did not make a field goal other than Ant's meaningless one toward the end, in the final few seconds, in the final 5 minutes of this game. So there's plenty of blame to go around. But the biggest thing is Luka and Kyrie just being incredible. We'll get to all of that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Do you watch Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long? If so, no doubt you have to turn down the volume because of all the shouting. Instead, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right. Let's talk about some of the offensive process for Minnesota. I thought the best way to describe the Wolves' process in this game offensively, if I could sum it up into one word, I would say flawed. I thought that Ant played fine once again. There were clearly a couple of really bad mistakes, really bad turnovers. I thought that Mike Conley, was great catch and shoot wise. Jaden McDaniels was great catch and shoot wise. I thought Nas did a good job of being aggressive when he needed to be. I actually think the Wolves did a really good job getting Ant off the ball and getting him some looks that way. We saw that in the third quarter when he was able to drive seams. He was able to get downhill. He was attacking from the wings more than being involved in action at the top, being the ball handler in a pick and roll, which takes so much more out of him if he's bringing the ball up the floor. It's actually a little bit like what the Nuggets did with Jamal Murray in the second round. Allow Mike Conley, Kyle Anderson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, one of those guys bringing the ball up the floor, allow Ant to play off the ball and, get him some looks that way. And I thought that was all really good. I thought they were active on the glass. They had a bunch of offensive rebounds. A lot of that was keyed with Ant being aggressive. A lot of that was third quarter. It was Rudy. Ant himself on the offensive glass was really good. He had 3 offensive rebounds. Cat had a nice offensive rebound in there. Just the activity level on the glass was solid in this game, driven largely on offense by Anthony Edwards attacking, getting downhill, getting into the paint. However, there are plenty of examples, and actually my favorite example, and by that I mean least favorite example because how it turned out, but I guess to prove my point, would be, I think it was the timeout. So Kyle Anderson made a bucket. That was the end of shot clock 1 foot inside the arc in the corner. He was given a hand grenade by Ant. He makes a tough shot, puts the Wolves up 2 with 5:05 left. Not quite the same as a Rudy Gobert turnaround jumper in Game 7 against Denver, but that was one of those where in that moment, I'm sure a lot of fans were like, okay, the Wolves should get this one now if that's going to happen, right? Kyrie makes a shot on the other end, tie game. Wolves call a timeout. Out of that timeout, the Wolves run a nothing possession. No ball movement, late decision making. Ant gets the ball out of his hands with like 5 seconds on the clock, 5 seconds left on the shot clock. Couple of swing pass or a swing to the other side, skip to the other side, swing to Naz, who forces a tough three at the shot clock buzzer. Just a really bad possession for Minnesota out of a timeout. It wasn't even clear to me what they were trying to accomplish in that timeout or coming out of that timeout, what that ATO even was. That's an indictment on maybe it's the coaching, certainly the coaching on some level, certainly the execution on some level. So probably both. I really would be surprised if the coaching staff called for Anthony Edwards to dribble in place for 12 seconds, allow a double to come, make a late, tough pass, and still have some stagnation on the backside and really get nothing. I don't think that was the play call. But clearly they didn't draw anything up that was executable given what Dallas was doing defensively anyway. The Wolves still got an offensive rebound off of that, and they missed. And then on the other side, PJ Washington hits a corner three. I believe that was the one where Ant kind of fell asleep off ball. And the Mavs are up 3. And then Rudy Gobert comes back into the game. Naz splits a pair of free throws. So the Wolves are down 2, and Rudy comes back in. Wolves didn't make another basket until they were already down 11 with 15 seconds left, and Ant makes a layup that doesn't matter. They didn't score another point after that Naz free throw, other than the meaningless Ant layup with 15 seconds left in the game. Their last point was a Naz Reid free throw with 3:21 left on the clock. And after that, there was a Luka timeout. There was Luka travel. There was like the Mavs made their own mistakes there too. But the problem was that they would make a mistake, then the Wolves would miss a shot, and then Mavs would score. And then it would go back and forth. Like Luka had a travel. He had a turnover with 1:30 left. Jaden steals it when the Wolves are still only down 4. And then Cat shoots a 3 and misses. Kyrie hits a shot on the other end, and that's basically game. It's a 6-point game at that point with a minute left to play. The execution out of timeouts was very poor for Minnesota in this game. And I am a staunch Chris Finch defender, and I'm not going to go off the rails here and blame Chris Finch for anything about this season because they're in the conference finals. I mean, to be fair, like Jason Kidd's coach of the conference finals, Luka Doncic has played in the conference finals. Kyrie Irving has won a championship. There is more experience on the Dallas side. These are all close games. And the Wolves haven't played well, but they've been in every one of these games. Pound for pound, this Wolves team is still a better team, but they are getting out executed down the stretch. Dallas has the best player on the floor, and they're getting out coached. They just are. Some of these adjustments that Dallas has been able to make that the Wolves haven't been able to counter have been tough. For Dallas to still execute defensively without Derek Lively, and also really execute offensively. And a lot of that is just the incredibleness, if you will, of Luka Doncic. I mean, like nobody else is, other than PJ Washington and Derek Jones Jr., just knocking down open threes and the Wolves role players not knocking down open threes. This is all Luka and a lot of Kyrie too. I mean, Kyrie actually shot the ball better from the floor than Luka. They combined though for only 9 assists and 7 turnovers because when the Wolves got the ball out of their hands, the defense still scrambled okay for Minnesota. They were still able to force 14 turnovers in this game, 7 of them by the superstar duo of Kyrie and Luka. But when Luka was able to go one-on-one and get a shot up, or Kyrie was able to go one-on-one against Mike Conley and get a shot up, more often than not it went in because of the incredible shot-making ability of those guys. So again, oversimplifying things, admittedly. The out coaching, the best player on the floor, and then the crunch time execution, which is a combination of those two things, right? The adjustments and the substitution patterns being better for Dallas, and then the best player on the floor being Luka Doncic. And clearly the second best player on the floor in this series has been Kyrie Irving. There's no question. Down the stretch, those things matter, and Dallas wins the execution game easily. Tie game going to the fourth quarter. Wolves up a bucket with 5 minutes to play. Dallas ends up winning by 9. I want to close with individual studs and duds. Now we're going to talk Ant. We're going to talk Cat. You better believe it. And we'll get into a lot more of this stuff on Tuesday as well. So all that's coming up here next. All right. Let's just go into individual studs and duds because this is going to take us to where I want to go next. Let's talk about Karl-Anthony Towns. This has been a rough series. Cat, overall, is 15 of 54 in this series. That's 27.8% from the field. 27.8%. I believe he's 3 of 22 from 3, which is like nothing percent. Like basically 10, 11%, right? Cat just hasn't been good enough. And I am if you listen to this podcast regularly, I know I've been criticized for defending Cat a lot. I do think Cat gets a bad rap generally too often. Even in the first and second round, when people were getting on him after 1 or 2 slow games, he's been incredible overall in the playoffs, and he's been incredible defensively. The defensive matchup isn't as clear for him in this series, and I almost wonder if that's impacting his. I'm not making excuses. I'm just, Karl-Anthony Towns is not this bad of an offensive player. He was 0 of 8 outside the arc in this game. I'd be curious to know when the last time he missed that many threes without a make was in a game. 5 of 18 from the field. The game before, 4 of 16. Game 1, 6 of 20. That's 27.8% for the series. And what did I say earlier? Yeah, 3 of 21. 3 of 21 from the field, which is 13%. Is that right? 3 of 21? 3 of 22. I was right about that. 13.6% from 3. It's just unusual. And at this point, certainly he looks like he's pressing a little bit. A couple of makes he had, a couple of his first makes in this game were off the dribble, attacking. He's not getting called for offensive fouls in this series, and he is attacking more. He still managed to shoot 8 threes. Now, he didn't get his feet set on a number of them, didn't look comfortable. He shot 9 threes in game 1, but only made 2. So again, 3 for 22 on threes. It doesn't change the fact that he is the best shooting big man and one of the very best shooters, period, in this game. There's no question about that. It doesn't mean that he can't also have 3 bad games in a row, and he has. He just hasn't played well. And the Timberwolves obviously need more than 14 points on 18 shots from Karl-Anthony Towns, or 15 points on 16 shots like last game, or 16 points on 20 shots in game 1. They need more out of Karl-Anthony Towns. And I don't know that it's anything other than when Cat starts going poorly, he presses, which is not unique to Karl-Anthony Towns, but that's what's happening in this series. He's rushing some of these 3-point attempts. He's getting concerned with drawing fouls in the paint, although certainly like the level of his complaining is nowhere near where we've seen it at points in his career. So this is just Cat not playing well. And defensively, the role isn't as defined as it was in round 1 or round 2. Like, it just is what it is. He's 5 of 18 in this game, 0 of 8 outside the arc, 11 rebounds, 3 assists. He did have no turnovers in this game. The ball actually wasn't in his hands all that often. Of those 18 field goal attempts, 8 of them were threes, and many of them were very quick catch and shoot, just hair trigger release for Karl-Anthony Towns. Clear dud. There's no other way to put it. Clear dud. They need more from him in game 4. I don't know how else to put it. Like, I don't think it's not the turnover thing. It's not the stray voltage thing. It's just he's missing shots, and therefore he's rushing himself, and he just hasn't been able to catch up. Another dud for me in this game. I don't know. I guess I got to go Rudy Gobert. I mean, 29 minutes, 5 fouls, 9 points on 4 of 4 shooting. Only got to the line once in this game. 6 rebounds, 2 assists. He was not good defensively. And I'm not going to turn this into a Rudy Gobert rant. Perhaps we'll visit this on Tuesday. The discourse surrounding Rudy is still very, we'll call it frustrating. I don't want to go off the rails here. It's frustrating. The Wolves are putting him in a tough spot defensively. We also know Rudy's been good defending in space this year. He has been. defending in space generally versus defending in space against Kyrie or Luka is a different proposition. And he just never looked comfortable in this game. Cleaned up nicely. I think 3 of his 4 buckets came in offensive rebounds. There was one big 4-5 pick and roll cat to Rudy that was nice. But 9 and 6 and 5 fouls in 29 minutes is not going to cut it with Rudy. And when he came back in the game, they didn't score a bucket after that. What did I say? He came back in with like 4 to play. Yeah, 3:20 to play in the game. And the Wolves didn't. They made a free throw. Like he came back in between Naz's free throws. They didn't score again until Ant's meaningless layup with 15 seconds left. Not a good Rudy game. Those are the 2 duds for you in this one. Studs? Weirdly, I mean, there's several. Kyle Anderson was great. 10 points, 3 assists, 5 of 6 shooting. Did what they asked him to do. Didn't shoot any threes. Couple of blocks. Was the Wolves' best defender on Luka in this game. No question. Was the best defender on Luka in this game. And it's a good matchup for Kyle Anderson. Chris Finch said post-game you should have played Kyle Anderson more. I don't know how much more. I mean, you could have left him in instead of Rudy at the end. I don't know how much more you want to play Kyle Anderson. But he was good. It was a good Kyle Anderson game. I think he's one of your best options against Luka. I know that that's crazy, but the size, the combination of size and physicality, intelligence, all of the above, I think he's a really good, I don't want to say answer, but potential solution to put on Luka Doncic. I thought Jaden McDaniels was great. I thought he played 32 minutes, got 5 fouls called on him. Probably 3 of them were real ticky-tack, and I hated them. 15 points on 8 shots, 3 of 4 outside the arc. He only had 1 rebound. He had 1 steal, no turnovers for Jaden McDaniels. He's been great in this series. None of this is Jaden's fault. He's been really, really good. Those are the 2 studs for this one. I'm not going to name another one. Ant was fine. You know, we talked about this earlier. I thought the decision-making was still a beat slow at times. He came to life in the 3rd quarter. The dunk was incredible. After, what did he shoot? 12 of his 16 shots from outside the arc the other night. I guess that was that game 1? I think it was game 1. Am I right about that? I want to make sure I'm right. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, 12 of his 16 shots in game 1 were 3s. 7 of his 17 in game 2 were 3s. In this game, he shot 22 twos and only 2 3-pointers. It was 0 of 2 outside the arc. It's like one of the few times it feels like Anthony Edwards has been overthinking what he's supposed to be doing. And he only had 4 fourth-quarter points. 9 assists, 5 turnovers. He had 9 boards, 3 offensive rebounds, had a couple of just wow offensive rebounds, wow athleticism plays in this game, but just not enough. 26, 9, and 9, 2 steals, 5 turnovers. And they need more out of him in game 4 if they're going to keep this thing alive. We'll talk a lot more about that and what to expect in game 4 on Tuesday's show. We'll have a show for you Tuesday morning to set you up for Tuesday night in game 4. Nobody's come back. I think 0-154 are teams that have fallen down 3-0 in a series. So we'll get to all that on Tuesday. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV, and you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Of course, we'll have a show Tuesday. We'll also have a postcast following Game 4 on Tuesday night on Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube, and also that audio here on Locked On Wolves. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.